Hello, hello. What's up, guys? It's Jen Rosenbaum, and I am here today to talk to you a little bit more about my breast cancer journey. If you want to find out more about the women's empowerment work that I do, by the way, you can check me out at shamelesslyfeminine.com. So today I want to talk to you about probably the number one question that I get from everybody. How come you didn't lose your hair, even though you had chemotherapy? So I want to talk a little bit about that today, what I did to prevent losing my hair, what that process was like, and answer any questions that you may be thinking and not want to ask somebody, because it's a sensitive topic, right? Like talking about losing your hair, it's sensitive. So I had 8 rounds of CMF chemotherapy. There are different types of chemotherapy. My chemotherapy was on what they call the lighter side because I didn't have lymph node involvement, and the way that they decided which chemotherapy I would have is based on something called an onco type score. So my onco score, what happens is when you have a mastectomy, you send it out to get tested, and then it comes back with a score of how likely it is for your cancer to return. If you're on the low end, you don't need chemotherapy. If you're on the high end, you definitely need chemotherapy. And if you're in the middle, they don't really know right now whether chemotherapy helps or not, or it may lower your chance of reoccurrence by 2% to 5%, something around those numbers. They're not really 100% sure. The cutoff for chemotherapy is 18. So if you get an 18 or below, you don't need chemotherapy. If you have a 19 or above, you probably need chemotherapy if you're in that middle range. And if you're in the high range, you definitely need it. So again, the cutoff is 18. My score was a 19. It's the only time in the world that I was not happy I got a high score. So they suggested this chemotherapy called CMF. So again, it's not as strong as something like ACT, or they call the Red Devil, but it whooped my ass real good. And not everybody on CMF loses their hair. So basically what they told me was that, you'll only lose maybe up to 50% of your hair, 25 to 50% of your hair. Well, here's the thing about that. And that's not always true. Some people lose all their hair on CMF. They don't really know. Okay, so it's sort of a gamble. So I had some decisions to make about the cold cap. I thought to myself, okay, well, I can do something to help me try not to lose my hair, or I can go into this and just whatever happens will happen. And, if I go bald, great, fine, I'll embrace that. And if I don't, fine, I'll embrace that too. But the more I thought about it, there was reasons why I chose to use the cold cap. First of all, control. It was really important for me to have control anywhere that I could during this journey, because cancer absolutely takes away all of your control. Period. End of story. You have no control over your life, over your health, over, there's so many things it takes away from you. So I decided, okay, you know what? Part of me was more worried about losing my hair than my breasts, because if you lose your breast, you can kind of hide it. You can put it under clothing. Not everybody needs to know, but your hair is super outward, right? And I do a lot of public speaking, and I do a lot of teaching, and a lot of videos and Facebook Lives and Instagram stories. And, like I said, if I went bald, I would embrace that. But I thought to myself, well, maybe I don't have to. Maybe I don't have to take that part of my femininity away. So that was one reason I chose to use the cold cap. The second reason was my children. My daughter was terrified of me losing my hair. So I promised her that I would do everything I could to avoid it if I could. And number 3 was, there's a psychology behind losing your hair that I think is about looking sick. Now, again, if I went bald, or if you're bald, you're watching this and you went bald from chemotherapy or from anything else in the world for that matter, like alopecia or anything, nobody's judging you. You're still beautiful. Nobody cares. But there's something about when you see a bald person, I think people treat you differently a little bit, right? And not always in a bad way. Maybe they have a little more sympathy for you. And maybe they have a little more understanding, or they're a little more curious. But I was really afraid of being treated differently and being looked at differently. That scared me. So that was part of my decision. Cold capping is expensive. It cost me $552 every single time I put that cold cap on. So do the math. I did 8 sessions times $552 paid out of pocket, no insurance coverage whatsoever, which is something that I think is absolutely ridiculous, because I realize it's not a health necessity, but it is a mental health necessity for some people as they go through this journey. But that's, to get on my soapbox another day. So Yes, I paid for the cold cap. Now, here's how it works. I know there's a lot of questions like, what is the cold cap? How does it work? Does it work for everybody? The answer is no, it doesn't work for everybody. In fact, they told me a story about a woman who had CMF chemotherapy who used the cold cap and still lost all of her hair. And then there's stories of women who have ACT and they don't lose their hair with the cold cap. It really depends. Everybody's different. The way your body reacts is different. I can tell you through my chemotherapy, I did lose like the hair on my legs. I lost, like I barely had to ever shave my armpits. My eyebrows started falling out. I started losing some eyelashes. So I do believe that using the cold cap was really a good idea for me because I do believe I probably would have lost a lot more hair than I did based on how the rest of my body reacted to the chemotherapy. So let me tell you how it works. I used a system called DigniCap. DigniCap is Memorial Sloan Kettering has it in their facility. It's a big machine that has a tube, and what they do is they attach the tube to this head covering. And if anybody's ever checked out my Instagram page at it's at Jen Rosenbaum or at Shamelessly Feminine, if you go backwards a little bit, you'll see photos of me with this cap on. It's like super tight. Oh my gosh. Even as we're talking about it, by the way, I feel this nausea, which I'll explain in a minute. They put this cap on. First, they put on this like plastic cap that has this tubing through it so the cold water can go through it. And then they put on this almost like a swim cap over your head that like straps under your chin to keep it real tight. And they put some things in there. They jammed some things in there. When I first started, it was maxi pads. I took maxi pads and jammed it in between the two layers so that everything would be really tight and secure and against the scalp. And then they put another covering over it that goes under your chin, and it holds it so tight that you're kind of like this for hours. It's really uncomfortable. So the first thing you do when you walk in, you wet your hair. So your hair's wet. They put this on. They hook you up to the machine, and then it starts like putting really, 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 really cold water or whatever it is that they push through the machine. So it starts freezing your scalp. And the concept behind that is that when you freeze a part of your body, the capillaries close, right? They get really small. So if the capillaries close, then the theory is that the chemotherapy will not get to your scalp. So this is a little controversial because some people are a little concerned that what if a cancer cell escaped and it went into your scalp and you did chemotherapy, but it didn't get to your scalp, and you'll have cancer later. I think the chance of that is very rare right now, so they're not super concerned, but it's a thought. This is only used right now for hard tumors, so nothing like in your blood, no cancers in your blood. It's just used for hard tumors, and I think that they're using it quite often now for breast cancer patients. But again, I don't know all of the statistics and the different information. I'm not a doctor and I don't claim to be one, so you have to ask about it. So you get hooked up to this machine, and I'm hooked up to this machine for half an hour before chemotherapy starts, and they really want to make sure your scalp is frozen. Now, what does it feel like? This is a really tough one, and I'm just going to be real honest for anybody that wants to do it. It sucks badly. And I gave birth to 2 children, and I had a mastectomy, and this cold cap sucks very badly. It feels like brain freeze on crack. There were moments where I would just sit there and I would just I just had to kind of talk myself out of it. Before I started my chemotherapy treatment, they would give me Ativan and they would give me Tylenol to help with the headache, and Ativan to help with the anxiety. And in the beginning, I was like, I don't really need Ativan. I'm not anxious. By the second time around in chemo, I was like, give me the Ativan. By the 5th chemo, I was like, can you give it to me in the intravenous, in the IV, because the pill isn't working well enough. If they offer you Ativan, take it. Trust me, you will thank me for it later. And this is from somebody who doesn't do medication. It was really helpful. But basically what happens is you get this really, 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 really bad brain freeze. And it makes your body cold. So you're kind of shivering. And you can't put headphones in. You can't really hear anything because it's covering your ears. You can't watch TV. You can't really, I would have my phone with me. I couldn't even really concentrate. It was like your brain was just off duty. It was hard to eat anything because your chin is strapped in so hard that your jaw would hurt. And I will say this, over the sessions of chemotherapy that I had over 16 weeks, there were some changes that they made. They changed the strap. So I think that they're constantly changing things, and it's been almost a year. Well, it's been a year since I started chemotherapy. So I would imagine that things are even a little bit different now. But at the time, super uncomfortable, really tight. And it would cause, like, the whole chemotherapy and the cold cap would cause this sort of nausea, right? So I'm feeling it now, and it's a very interesting thing. So the day before I would have chemo, I would start getting what's called anticipatory nausea, where I knew I was going, so I started feeling the feelings. And it's strange because the nausea for me didn't really come from my stomach. It came sort of in here. There was like a nausea happening in here. And I could feel it now. Like I said, even as we're talking, even as I remember using the cold cap, the nausea comes back. The body is still making a connection there. So I would wear it throughout chemotherapy. Now, during my chemo, there's one medication that causes mouth sores. So when you have medication that causes mouth sores, you suck on ice while that medication is being given. Same concept, so that the chemotherapy doesn't get to your mouth, and that helps prevent cold sores. So now understand, I'm having this thing that's like freezing my skull basically in my head, and now I'm sucking on ice, super uncomfortable. So my chemotherapy would last about an hour and a half. So when that was done, and by the way, the last drip that I had for chemotherapy, the two were pushes, what they call pushes. So I would have an IV because I didn't have a port. I would have an IV, and they would push the medication through the push through the IV, and then the last one would be a drip. So it was like a bag that would drip, and they can speed up or slow down that drip. And some people ask them to speed it up or slow it down based on headaches. So originally it was a half an hour drip, and I got terrible headaches from it in the beginning. So they extended it to an hour. And then the cold cap was so bad, I decided to push my drip back to a half an hour. So I asked them to shorten it to a half an hour. So overall, I was getting chemo for about an hour and a half. So I would wear it for that hour and a half, and then you have to wear it for 2 hours after. So do the math. It's about 4 hours altogether, maybe a little bit longer, about 4.5 hours by the time that they, fix everything and do everything. If you have to go to the bathroom while you're wearing the cold cap, what they do is unplug you. You have literally 8 minutes to do it and hook up to the machine, or else you lost the whole session basically, or else the session is pointless. In 8 minutes, I guess the temperature of your scalp goes up enough that it makes it pointless. So you would have 8 minutes to go to the bathroom. And what else did I want to say about this? Yeah, expensive, uncomfortable. Oh, I would take it off at the end, and it would literally be frozen to my head. So when you took it off, I would have icicles on my hair everywhere. And here's the other interesting thing about cold capping. When you're cold capping, you have to take treatment of your hair a little bit differently. So no brushing your hair, no wearing ponytails, only washing it once a week. You can't put any heat on your hair, toward the scalp. So no blow drying. You can't color it. You can't cut it. You can't wear a hat. So you basically have bad hair days every day for months. And, sometimes I would curl my hair because I could do like a curl on the bottom and I wouldn't touch the scalp. So I felt like that was okay. But when I did wash my hair, I think I washed my hair twice a week. I think I broke rules a little bit, but you have to wash it the morning of your chemotherapy. And I think one other day they let you do it. So they make you wash it the morning of, so it's not greasy and oily. So I would wash it and it would still come out in clumps. I mean, it was like, I would say to my husband, like, look at how much hair fell out today. And he would go, oh, it's just like it normally is, trying to make me feel better. But now, like, I wash my hair and I have like 3 or 4 hairs on my hand. And I'm like, no, this is how it normally is. It would fall out in clumps. And I would say I probably lost, I want to say about 30% of my hair, even with the cold cap. And most of it is back here. I feel like it was very thin back here. And my hair consistency definitely changed from the chemotherapy. I used to have like kind of wavy hair. And now my hair is just kind of frizzy, which is a bummer. So my hair has definitely changed, and the cold cap was definitely uncomfortable. But do I think it was worth it? I do. That's the thing. My hair is long, obviously. I mean, I think it would take like 7 years for my hair to grow back to this length. Maybe 5. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I am glad that I did it. and more for psychological reasons than even what I look like, because the truth of the matter is I'm wearing sweatpants every day and I'm wearing a hood and I could throw a hat on and I probably wouldn't bother me. But yeah, I'm glad that I did it. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And the irony of the cold cap is that I didn't want people to look at me as sick. The good thing is that they didn't. The bad thing is that I think sometimes people think, oh, she didn't have that bad of a case of breast cancer. I mean, she didn't lose her hair. She wasn't that sick. And there were times where I wanted to just be like, help me, people. Like, I'm really having a tough time here, but I didn't look sick. So it was confusing for the world at times. And that's one of the little downfalls of it. But otherwise, I am really glad I did it. And one thing I want to mention to you is because Memorial Sloan Kettering has the Digna Cap, I chose to do it that way, but not every hospital has it. But just because your hospital doesn't have it doesn't mean you can't do it. There are companies that rent cold caps that you can use with dry ice. I'm not exactly sure how they all work, but just Google cold cap for breast cancer or cold cap for cancer, and you'll see all sorts of companies that rent them and do it different ways. The good thing about the ones that are renting them is you're not hooked up to the machine. So when you're done, you can leave, you take the cold cap with you, you change it on your own times, you put different ice packs in it or whatnot. So that makes life a little bit easier. But I chose to do the machine just because it seemed like a no-brainer and I could just sit there and let everybody else do the work. But I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have about the cold cap. Yeah, again, expensive, uncomfortable, but I do think it was worth it, at least in my case. And it's a very personal decision, and it's one that you have to make on your own. Nobody can tell you what the right decision is for you. That is really my advice on that. Okay, as usual, if you have any questions, post them below. I'll make a video answering it for you, or I will respond to you on here answering it. Please make sure you subscribe, you give me a thumbs up on the video. The more women we can reach with these videos, and the more you can share with people going through the journey or supporting others going through the journey, the better it is for everybody. All right, guys, have an awesome day and in good health.